Right, good afternoon, everyone. For those people who don't know me, I'm not Jacob, I'm not King of Egypt, but I am an inflatable camel for the first time today. Um, I'm Richard, and hello, hiya, Joe. I know how you feel now, Linda, every time. Um, I've been coming to Fountains now for about 4 years with my family, and I help out at youth. And I'm very passionate about telling the Bible stories, but there is a danger that we can turn the story into a simplified version. And Sharon did a wonderful talk about Jonah and the whale a couple of weeks ago. And the motto of the story is not all just about the whale. So we're going to do the same with Joseph today. A story. So if we look through, oh, I need a clicker. Right. So anybody, by the way, this isn't a without a doubt question here, but anybody know who that might be? That's Games Master Alfie, is that? So, so if we look through children's eyes, then from my memories of going to Sunday school, that I remember the Technicolor Dreamcoat, the thin and the fat cows, and possibly that Joseph became Pharaoh's right-hand man. But if we look through adults' lenses, then we can. I seem to remember looking at the story when I was old, and remembered this about Joseph being a bit big-headed, a bit boastful, and favouritism over his dad. And you can see that led to these jealous and murderous thoughts and eventually slavery. And there was favour and trust and sexual harassment. Joe missed that bit out. Despair and waiting in jail. There's also him falling on his feet. Both times with Potiphar's household and with Pharaoh, he became to a position of authority. And times of testing when Joe abbreviated the story. There's lots of this going backwards and forwards with his siblings, and eventually this great reunion, relief and joy. So this story has got it all. Now, I haven't got a crystal ball, but I think this would make a fantastic musical. Honestly, I really do. And I'm sure most of us have gone to this, but I was going to say this was so bad it was good that for Joe's birthday a couple of years ago, I took her to the Grand in Leeds, and there was Jason Donovan. I think this was a low point in my life, watching middle-aged women screaming for Jason Donovan. This is not great. And, do you know, there was basketball players, there was country line dancing, but I just don't quite remember where God was in this story. And isn't it phenomenal that you could have such an amazing biblical story that hits the West End, but God disappears from that story? So let's have a look at the story in more detail. Like Joe said, life has got its ups and downs. And at no point do we know sometimes if the next day is going to be up or down. And I think this is a lovely picture where we can, as Joe said, we can be in those situations thinking, where is God in those ups and those downs? So if we look at Joseph's ups and downs, so there was lots of ups, wasn't there? He was a favoured son. He was head of the household in Potiphar's house, and then he was Pharaoh's right-hand man, and then he was reunited with his family at the end. But we sometimes forget the down times as well. He had a real roller coaster ride, didn't he? He was thrown into a pit with his brothers. Can you imagine that? I've got two older brothers, so I can imagine this a little bit. But also sold into slavery, and in those days, you know, really, he must have wondered what his future was going to be. He was unfairly accused by Potiphar's wife and thrown into jail. And again, we flip through this story, but it was, as Alfie said, he was in jail for at least 2 years before he came out. And he was actually forgotten about while he was in jail, even though he interpreted those dreams. So where, in all of this ups and downs, where was God? So let's look in the story a little bit more detail. And whenever I'm preparing for youth or today, I always learn. I think it's fantastic, the Bible. There's always something new there. There's something that you can learn. And it amazed me. I was thinking Joseph, and it's so easy for us to think we can do it in our own ways and our own efforts. You know, I can interpret dreams. I'm in charge of this household. I'm in charge of the whole of Egypt. But actually, in the defense of Joseph, he gave God the glory throughout. So if we just look at some of these verses, and in joy and success, the Lord was with Joseph. So all that he prospered, and he lived in the house of his Egyptian master. This was Potiphar. When his master saw the Lord was with him, and that the Lord gave him success in everything he did. And it's quite interesting, that statement, isn't it? It wasn't because Joseph was brilliant at what he did. His master saw that the Lord was with Joseph, and that was why he prospered. So Joseph was being a witness for God in that situation. And then, my eyesight's not good enough to see up there, so I'm sorry. On this side, when temptation, injustice, and when Potiphar's wife was after him, he used God, and he said, how could I do such a wicked thing against God? So again, he witnessed for God, saying, this is my God, and this isn't something I can do. Then, when he was in favour in dark times, when we're at our lowest ebb, we wonder where God has gone. But Joseph said, but while Joseph was there in prison, the Lord was with him. He showed him kindness and granted favour in the eyes of the prison warder. So again, really important that when Joseph was at the high, okay, you can see the up arrows, up thumbs, and the down thumbs. You can see that God was with him during these times. And some other key verses here. Again, when Joseph said to them, do not interpretations belong to God, tell me your dreams. And this is where the cupbearer and the baker came to see him. So we interpreted other dreams, but then he was completely forgotten about until he was summoned in front of Pharaoh. And I think this is the bravest bit of all here. We've got Pharaoh summoning him, and the pressure. Can you imagine? We know what happens in the story, but can you imagine if Joseph had got the dreams wrong? Remember what happened to the baker in this story. So the pressure must have been on Joseph. But what did Joseph say? I can't do it. Joseph replied to Pharaoh, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires. Can you imagine in those days being in front of the king of Egypt and saying, no, it's my God. Not the God you follow, but my God can interpret these dreams. And again, under pressure, you said, so Pharaoh asked him, who can find anybody like this man, one in whom is the Spirit of God? How amazing is that? That you've got this foreign king saying to Joseph from a foreign place that this God exists, and this man is a witness for this God. Quite remarkable that under the pressure he was under. So God was in it all. God didn't appear just in the good times. And actually, when you look back at those slides, see how many down thumbs there are when Joseph was at the bottom of the pit, or he was in jail, or he was under pressure. God came good. So if we have a little look at looking through where God was it all, then it was God's faithfulness to Joseph throughout, when he was big-headed and when he was in jail, when he was in charge of all the households. God was there, the faithfulness. He's there in times of great trouble. That also Joseph acknowledged to the king that the talents he had interpreting dreams, and is able to organize all the things in Egypt, was actually God's given talent. But also patience. We do forget that. I like what Joe said in the story. Did she say it was about 20 years between Joseph being thrown in the pit and him being reunited with his family? You know, these are long periods of time that Joseph had to go through. And as Joe said, life has got its ups and downs for all of us. And sometimes those highs are high, and sometimes, like this picture shows, there's low times as well. But what we must remember is that God is there for us, even in the scary times, because that's when we need to trust God the most. And sometimes that's when we learn the most, isn't it? So when things are going good, we can quite easily forget God. There was something quite good on Lectio yesterday, and it said, oh, glasses, middle ages here. Says here, what causes people who have known the power and presence of the living God to stop following him? According to Moses, it begins when they become complacent, forgetting to honour God as the Father who has lovingly formed and watched over them, relegating the Almighty Creator and Saviour to the sidelines of their life. So, in those good times, let's not forget God and give him the glory. But in the tough times, throughout all the seasons of our life, God is with us in full technicolor.